Welcome to the fifth and final episode of my spiritual journey. I have split this episode into two parts. Part 1 continues up to and including the night the devil whispered in my ear. Part 2 continues from then on to the present day. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve, 2023. This is the second most profound and energetically charged spiritual encounter I have ever had. An event that has totally redirected the trajectory of my life. Without this pivotal experience, it is almost certain that I would not find myself producing these episodes today. As I explained in the preceding fourth episode of my spiritual journey, called My Trips to India, my spiritual mentor fervently encouraged me to work now. Work. A directive that severed my spiritual connection, and I became almost entirely engrossed in the physical external world. Consequently, over the subsequent years, I embarked on a remarkable journey of personal growth, amassing a treasury of physical living knowledge. Simultaneously, there existed certain karmic debts that I needed to settle. Yet I must note, for reasons I will expound upon shortly, I occasionally received spiritual support during moments of distress. The year 1992 marked a significant milestone as my 40th birthday unfolded amidst the tumultuous chaos of Tropical Cyclone Fran. On this tempestuous night, my third daughter came into the world. I distinctly recall the harrowing journey, a frantic 50-kilometre drive through torrential rain, swollen creeks and ferocious winds, racing against the approaching cyclone when my wife went into labour and we were rushing to the hospital. In 1996, while I was in India, I received the news of my father's passing, a topic I previously explored in the prior episode. The year 2002 ushered in a period of upheaval, when my business partner forged a connection with a woman who shared his passion for plants. This relationship disrupted the group dynamic, ultimately leading to the collapse of our business. In hindsight, I can now appreciate the profound importance of this event, a crucial juncture for their personal growth. It became evident that both he and his partner needed to venture forth independently into the world. Nonetheless, this phase proved to be arduous and unpleasant. It was during this period that I experienced a dream of my spiritual teacher. In this dream, he conveyed, "I have initiated the process in response to your request for change." Following this revelation, I ceased resisting the changes, and from that point onward, a harmonious flow prevailed. In 2004, we relocated to my hometown, where I acquired another taxi and operated it for approximately 3 years. Regrettably, this vehicle was plagued by issues from the moment of purchase, culminating in a catastrophic engine failure. This served as a proverbial last straw, prompting my decision to extricate myself from this venture, a liberating release. Soon after, I grappled with chronic fatigue for an excruciating 8-month period. Each morning my mind remained clear while in bed, but upon arising, I could barely make it to the couch where I'd spend the rest of my day. This prolonged ordeal strained my family, leading to heightened tension and anxieties. Eventually, my frustration reached a breaking point, compelling me to make a radical decision. I left my family behind and embarked on a 2,000-kilometre journey to Queensland once again, where I sought refuge with my close friend. After a brief period of acclimatisation, I resumed my career as a taxi driver. Eventually, I secured a flat of my own despite lingering health issues. I was resolute in overcoming my persistent fatigue. During this challenging period, another dream featuring my spiritual teacher unfolded. In this dream, he laid his palm upon my forehead as I knelt before him, unleashing a surge of energy that coursed through my entire body. To my astonishment, upon awakening, the persistent fatigue had nearly entirely dissipated. I spent roughly 2 months at this occupation, gradually regaining my strength, and began feeling like my old former self. I eventually returned to my family and transitioned to working for a different taxi owner. Liberated from the burdens and pressures associated with taxi ownership, after a period of time, this new taxi owner offered a business proposal for us to establish a new company, prompting my relocation to Queensland again to breathe life back into my old business. This new business venture marked the start of my second significant karmic debt obligation. A few years earlier, I had befriended an individual in India who was grappling with a broken marriage and professional dissatisfaction. He was seeking a transformative change in his life, and he joined our company. Simultaneously, my marriage disintegrated, setting the stage for a relationship with my business partner's secretary in my hometown 12 months later. She eventually moved in with me after 2 years. Meanwhile, my business partner, who resided in a flat adjoining our house, embarked on a new romantic journey of his own. A recurring pattern began to emerge, reminiscent of events from my prior business. The business weathered a series of distressing incidents before its eventual demise, effectively settling another karmic debt. We eventually relocated to New South Wales, where I tried to sustain the business for 2 or more years, before succumbing to an increasing lack of interest and other complications. Around this time, my mother began exhibiting signs of dementia. We eventually decided to sell her property and relocate her to my hometown to be close to other family members, where she spent her final years. We then decided to shift back to our hometown, and I purchased another taxi, viewing it as the quickest and most pragmatic means to secure a livelihood. Unfortunately, this vehicle also met an untimely end after 3 years of costly repairs. You might wonder if I ever would learn my lesson by this point, and indeed, I finally received the message. I sought employment with a new taxi owner, commencing a 10-year stint with this taxi. These years were fraught with immense challenges and abundant opportunities for physical learning, while my spiritual connection remained elusive. I continually engaged in self-reflection and addressing my shortcomings when they surfaced. Unfortunately, as is common in our lives, these weaknesses often remain concealed until stress from real-world events unveiled them. Events that, more often than not, were a result of my own unaware physical actions. Over time, my dissatisfaction with taxi driving grew, and I sensed myself retreating from the external world. In my isolation, I gradually convinced myself that my life was nearing its conclusion, envisioning a future defined by mere existence, leading to a quiet departure from this earthly realm. However, fate had other plans in store. We now find ourselves at the precipice of my second most profound energetic spiritual experience, an encounter that has indelibly altered every facet of my life. I discerned only a single warning of this extraordinary event which was to come, a dream I had approximately a month before the event itself. The details of this dream will be unveiled in a comprehensive summary later in this episode. And now we embark on the night the devil whispered in my ear, an extraordinary event that transpired on May the 26th, 2021. That night in the realm of dreams, I found myself traversing a large tiled concourse. My path was converging with that of an impeccably dressed man in his late 40s. He exuded an air of sophistication, adorned in a long black business coat and polished shoes with perfectly groomed hair. As we maintained our parallel course, his gaze was fixed upon me and did not waver, even from a distance of 100 meters or so. Instinctively, I sensed the urgency to distance myself from him, and hastening across the square, I went around the building's corner and into a cramped room. Within this confined space, I stood alongside my girlfriend and her mother, who were huddled in the corner. In hushed tones, I cautioned them to be quiet. I said, "The devil is coming." In the breathless silence that followed, I witnessed his passage past the window, and before I could react, he opened the door and was beside me. His proximity was suffocating, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered with an intimacy that sent shockwaves through my mind. Each utterance bore forth a unique mystical symbol, accompanied by an explosion of searing white energy which blew my mind, etching those searing white-hot symbols indelibly into my memory. To this day, the brilliance of those symbols remains imprinted upon my consciousness. Suddenly, I then found myself back in the open plaza. Large cows were descending from the heavens. Their udders were swollen with abundance. These cows were landing all around me. Upon awakening, I turned to my partner, proclaiming, "Hold on tight, for I know not what avails us, but I sense our lives are about to be radically transformed." Little did I know just how accurate my premonition would turn out to be. Over 2.5 years have passed since that fateful dream, and far from abating, the pace of change has only quickened. An inner drive dormant for years now courses through me, reigniting my spiritual connection. My life has undergone such a profound transformation. I will delve into the intricate details of this shift later. It became evident that the devil was no malevolent entity, but rather a harbinger of change, capable of reshaping my destiny. The symbolic descent of cows from the spiritual realm signaled the giving of abundance from these realms. In addition to this amazing, powerful experience, I encountered another unexplainable physical supernatural event in mid-October 2023, which I will discuss later in this episode. Welcome to part 2. I will delve deeper into the events that transpired from that fateful night to the present day. I'll also provide an insight how I look at life and interact with it. However, before I proceed, I need to rewind and recount a dream I had approximately a month prior. In this dream, I embarked on a run, and as I sprinted, I noticed that I was retracing the steps of my life. A path meandered through landscapes, riverbanks, and vast dams. My pace quickened as I ran, and oscillated between smooth stretches, rough patches, and occasionally treacherous potholes. Eventually, I reached a portal adorned with 2 massive rusty gates. Upon passing through this portal, I beheld a dilapidated old bicycle leaning against one of the pillars. I distinctly remember thinking, I won't venture any further backwards. Turning back, I retraced my steps through the portal and ran the same path in reverse. However, this time as I ran, the path was broader, exceptionally smooth. The entire landscape was meticulously cared for and adorned with flourishing flowers and resplendent beauty. I arrived at my starting point only to find a row of turnstiles reminiscent to those at a sports arena entrance. Around 10 of them stood in line, each with varying queues of people waiting for their turn to pass through. One turnstile at the end beckoned with no one in line. Deciding not to wait with the crowd, I proceeded to the vacant turnstile, and that's when I woke up. This dream symbolises the notion of revisiting my life and commencing anew. I found myself retracing and smoothing over aspects of my past that needed attention. When I encountered the turnstiles, I wondered if it signalled the end of my life, prompting me to choose my path for the next life, and the turnstiles represented the paths that I could select. At the time, the dream puzzled me, but I sensed that there was a reason behind it, though I couldn't fathom it. A month later, the pivotal dream occurred, completely altering the course of my life. Shortly after that, my partner came home one evening and mentioned a tarot reader on YouTube known as Minnow Tarot, who was highly recommended by a colleague. We tuned in that night and it struck me instantly that I was meant to find this channel. Throughout my life, there have been instances where I was guided to sources of insight and assistance. I can equivocally attest that without this guidance, I wouldn't be here today sharing my story. This marked another significant juncture as I navigated the clash between my past and my newfound journey into a new life. From my first exposure to Minnow Tarot's readings, he spoke of impending changes, igniting my initial thoughts of creating YouTube videos. At 69 years old, I contemplated my dwindling years behind the wheel of driving a taxi, realising that by creating YouTube content allowed me to share my story and insights without venturing into the outside world, and hopefully some people would benefit from my life's experiences, a prospect that resonated with my Piscean nature. However, the road was tougher than anticipated, but the more I contemplated it, the stronger my desire grew. But the clash intensified between my present life, where I had resigned myself to a quiet existence, and the prospect of what lay ahead. As I began formulating these episodes, the ideas flowed incessantly. I found myself waking up at 3 a.m. with a mind brimming with ideas and information. My mind was unusually alert and ideas poured forth. To this day, I continue to watch Minnow Tarot, albeit with a bit less intensity. He was undoubtedly a guiding force to help me persevere through the darkest times that were to follow. His readings constantly urged me to hurry, get started, keep going, and break through. a motivation I desperately needed during these moments of darkness and internal conflict. The struggle ensued as I grappled with depression and resisted change. For days on end, I would wrestle with myself, followed by moments when I regained control, providing momentary relief. Before this cycle repeated itself. Nonetheless, I persisted, and now find myself about 80% determined with about 20% resistance. It's a significant shift from my initial 10% determination and 90% resistance. Over the past 2.5 years, I've come a long way. Furthermore, I had to acquire expertise in producing and editing these episodes. I immersed myself in YouTube tutorials to absorb as much knowledge as possible. I also had to overcome personal obstacles to sit in front of the camera and film, which was another challenge when doing videos. For survival, I supplemented my income by doing food deliveries, but it often left me exhausted and unproductive. Eventually, I scaled back my work hours significantly to focus on my new endeavour. I hadn't anticipated that the energy stemming from that night, when the devil whispered in my ear, would lead to additional consequences. It became evident to me that I was reliving my life from the time of the dark night of the soul. There was a period when I endured a severe 3-day crisis, which resembled a miniature dark night of the soul, though not as intense as the initial experience. I recognized the familiar energy immediately. I began noticing that after a period of intense struggle came a period of breakthroughs and progress. This has been repeating itself over and over again. The way information flowed to me and some experiences mirrored those from my past, yet with distinct differences. When I focus my mind on a problem now, the solutions materialize effortlessly. Information was streaming and guiding on how to do and organize what I was receiving. It was as though everything had been refined, condensing my previous knowledge into a more streamlined form. The only concern was I needed the discipline to do it all. I now understand that for the past 2.5 years, I've been diligently working on improving my mental, physical, and emotional well-being. I have a strong conviction that this preparation is geared towards what follows, the second awakening of my Kundalini. I've been simultaneously addressing these 3 aspects of myself. To facilitate this transformation, I've completely overhauled my diet. Initially, due to a wavering focus on my new life, I oscillated between commitment and non-commitment to the dietary changes. However, a health scare, a burst blood vessel near my retina led to a 50% vision loss in one eye. With other health concerns of high blood pressure and cholesterol jolted me into taking my dietary regime seriously. I now wholeheartedly embrace a new way of eating, eliminating sugar and alcohol. I also adopted a practice of one substantial meal in the evening, while beginning my day with a health elixir, typically apple cider vinegar supplemented occasionally with other additives, like those for parasite cleansing or stomach health, for instance. I abstain from solid foods until around 10:30 a.m. or even later, preferring what I call a mega smoothie comprised of fresh fruit, frozen berries, grains, raw honey, and other additional additives. I drink 750 ml of this smoothie over a period of a few hours. My dietary choices have continued to evolve as I progress. I have shed 22 kilos, having started at 95 kilos. I also invested in a smartwatch with health tracking capabilities, recognizing the need for my mental, physical, and emotional states to be as pure as possible for the upcoming resurgence of the Kundalini. I have been working in harmony with this process, realizing its significance. My 50 years of driving taxis on and off is completely over with, and now I'm just doing the food delivery, mornings and evenings, or sometimes just in the evenings, depending on how I felt and whatever else I was doing. I was being shown 2 major issues of how my mind reacted negatively, which had to be dealt with both for when I was driving. I tend to be, what's the correct word? Impatient when driving. I've always driven on the edge. I would drive just over the speed limit, but not enough to get caught, even though I've been caught plenty of times. I tend to get impatient when I come up behind individuals, sitting at say 50 kilometers an hour in a 60 zone. This impatience would build until it would shift into the state of anger. which became worse and worse over a period of time. I knew I had to work on this. I knew I had to defeat it somehow. However, it worsened, and I was having great difficulty in trying to control it. It reached a point where I thought I was going to have some type of breakdown. I then had a dream, but it wasn't a dream. It was an in-between sleep. I was in a half-sleep state. I woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning, half awake, and the only way to describe it is that there was a creature spooning me in bed. I was definitely consciously aware of this. He had his arm over my waist, with his arm coming up the front of my body. His hand was bluish-black, and his fingernails were about 4 inches long and were buried in my neck. I tried to move to release his grip, but he would squeeze my throat tighter with every movement I made. I couldn't move. He had total control over me, and then I woke up. The interesting thing is, though, I've had bad neck and shoulder troubles for many years, especially on the right side of my neck and down into my shoulder. I went back to sleep and had another dream, where I was sitting on a sofa, and opposite me was another sofa with 6 children sitting on it. I was looking after and caring for these children, and next to me was sitting a huge, powerful man with massive, bulging muscles. I instantly knew that this was the creature that had control of me. He still had his massive hand gripped into my throat, and was still controlling everything I did. He inexplicably released me and left for some reason. Then a man and a woman came over to me. The woman had a clipboard in her hand, and began asking questions about the creature who was controlling me. I said I know of him, but he is gone, and you had better go, because he is going to come back soon, and he won't be happy. When I said this, they both had small smiles on their faces. The man then sat alongside of me, and the woman sat on the other side, to care for the children. The creature then came back, and he was furious they were here with me. He stood in front of me and threw a punch at the man sitting next to me. The punch just missed my nose as it went through the air. I could feel its wind, and it missed the man sitting next to me as well. As he did this, I noticed his groin was a few inches from my face. Quickly, I pulled my arm back and gathered all the strength I could and let go with the biggest, hardest punch into his groin. I mustered every ounce of power I could find into that punch. I then woke up. Instantly, from that dream onwards, my anger had dissipated by about 70%. Those 2 people were actually guides. When you see 2 people in a dream like this, they're usually guides, they're helpers. They were there to help us. Anger is a very low vibration. The next level up was my impatience, which was a higher vibration than anger, but still a low vibration. Now I have to deal with that. I know I have to, and was wondering how to deal with the impatience. I was actually fighting it while I was driving. It was amazing how everything was happening. I'd be driving along the road, and a car would pull out in front of me, which would sit on 10 kilometres below the speed limit. This constantly happened all day. I was definitely having my nose rubbed in my impatience. Over and over this went on for week after week, and it was wearing me out, to be honest. I thought, how am I going to defeat this or get in control of it? And then one morning in the shower, a voice said to me in my mind, don't focus on the battle, focus on the outcome. As soon as I heard this, I knew it was true. If I focus on the battle all the time, I'm just going to manifest more battles. It's as simple as that. So now when the impatience comes, I just calm myself down. What I actually do is this. A few hours before my Kundalini rose on that fateful day, I was receiving all sorts of information while travelling along the road. I remember the feeling, the calmness, and the peace that went with it. There have been times since then that when I'm driving, I can automatically shift into a peaceful and calm state that comes over me. I've always realised that I could bring this feeling up at any time. I just had to focus on the experience, and that peace and calmness would come. So I started doing this. Now I can usually bring the feeling back just by calming myself down when I begin to feel upset. I'm convinced that eventually this feeling can become permanent. How long will this take? Who knows? But anyone can do this. All you have to do is pick the most calm, peaceful, enjoyable time that you have ever had in your life. When you feel angry or impatient or whatever negative emotion, just think of this event. Once you think of this, you'll feel better. Focusing on the good event takes the focus off the negative feelings. Doing this, you have instantly risen your vibration into the higher mind. With the anger, it is slightly different, and needs a stronger approach due to the lower vibration. The voice also came when I was fighting this anger, and it said to me, "Speak to it as if you were speaking lovingly to a young child." As I was in the grip of anger while I was driving, or at any other time, I would say to it something like this: "It's okay. There's no problem. There is no reason to get upset. This just throws us off center. We can do this. We should be calm and peaceful." Once that feeling of calmness came back, I would say to it, "Doesn't this feel better? This feeling of peace and calmness. This works with any negative event." Once I was feeling and responding to the anger and impatience, I had automatically shifted to a very low vibrational rate, throwing me completely off center. But when I realized this and I started speaking to it, I was instantly back into a higher state, a higher vibration, above the anger, because I was looking at the anger from the higher mind. I've definitely improved a lot while doing this. Don't get me wrong, I still have a long way to go, but the most important thing is that I'm seeing positive results. However, at times it really wears me out, which I don't fight against. As soon as I start fighting, I'm back into a lower state, and am off center. I know everything will happen as it will happen, and how it's meant to happen. I probably should not have said so much about this at this point. It is such a simple process, but it is very powerful in the long term, and is directly aimed at anyone who wishes to take control over their conditioned selves. Much more will be discussed on this subject in the future. During this phase, I had a significant dream. In this dream, I returned to my subjective spiritual group. A fellow devotee noticed my return and enthusiastically announced it, leading me into a room where a spiritual master greeted me with a warm hug. As he embraced me, he whispered, suggesting I seek professional assistance for my neck issues. This event harkened back to my earlier experiences with the subjective group, which I have detailed in the second episode of my journey, The Dark Night of the Soul. The next day, I scheduled an appointment with a chiropractor who I have been seeing once a month for the last 7 months. I've been working on the emotional energy of the anger and impatience, which has been affecting my neck and shoulders. Now I'll have to work on the physical aspects of my body associated with this energy. The chiropractor has done wonders. I felt a change from the first session within my body, but it's still not quite 100%. So the more I work on the emotional aspects, the physical aspects will come into alignment. In the third episode of my journey, when I had the rebirthing experience, and I had cleared all that negative energy from my mother, all this energy had been cleared. And when I was standing in the field of flowers, and the log cabin began to be built one log at a time, and the voice said loudly in my head, "I can put everything back as it was if I like." My physical and emotional bodies were all brought back into alignment for the moment that my kundalini rose. This was essential for the energy to flow without resistance. However, once I had been through the rising of the kundalini and I went back into the outside world, I decided to start my business, and the reconditioning process began all over again. Gradually over the years, I have taken on the anger and the impatience, with many other issues due to the many experiences I have had over the following 40 plus years, which now has to be dealt with before my kundalini can awaken again safely. The 6 months ritual I did in the second episode of my journey, The Dark Night of the Soul, if I had continued that to the end, I would be an entirely different person to who I am today. However, I had to finish that ritual 2 weeks earlier to fulfill my karmic obligations and have all these different learning experiences. Once my lower self accepts all the changes that I'm imposing upon it, and I deal with all the resistances, I will have merged the physical and the spiritual together. This is my ultimate goal. After that night, the night the devil whispered in my ear, my spiritual connection was completely restored. The information was flowing, the dreams were flowing, everything was flowing, and it feels good to be whole once again. Who or what it was that whispered in my ear, I have no idea. But whatever it was, it had tremendous power. The power to reset my life by doing these episodes and eventually videos will merge the two, my physical and spiritual lives. With all the many negative experiences my lower self suffered and endured over the years, I began to withdraw. I am a Pisces, and I don't handle conflict very well. I just withdraw, and I withdrew into my cave, which is my house. I love my own time, but don't get me wrong, I do go out and associate with people, but only when I want to, and not very often. I have no qualms with communicating with others. After 50 years of taxi driving, I can communicate with anybody. But I built this shed of protection around me. It was like living in a closet. The world couldn't get in, and I didn't want it to. That changed when the devil whispered in my ear. I remember two distinct dreams. The first one was I was in the bathroom, which was like a small closet. The door was closed, and all of a sudden the door started to open slowly. Instantly, fear filled me. Who's there? What's going to happen? I was absolutely terrified of that door opening. I went over to the door and carefully opened it and looked out into the passageway, absolutely terrified of what I was going to find and see. I then woke up. The walls were beginning to crumble. This was the first opening of the door to let the outside world in. In the second dream, which was similar, I was in my lounge room and there is a passage going to the bedrooms. I was standing in the middle of the lounge room, yelling at somebody unseen. Get out of here! Get away! I was yelling. I picked up a coffee table and was swinging it around. I couldn't see anybody, but I knew someone was in the room with me. I was terrified, and I then woke up. By doing what I'm doing now, it's bringing me out into the outside world, even though I can still stay within my house. But I've opened the communication with the outside world, and I will see how it goes and where it takes me. I'm totally committed to following this through and go wherever I'm led to on my path. I was also learning how to do these episodes, editing and everything else to go with it. Getting over the newness of sitting in front of a microphone, watching how I speak, all sorts of things I was learning, and fighting with my resistance as well at the same time. One of the biggest battles I was having was with the business that I decided to do after ending the dark night of the soul. I still had a small aspect of it going, but it's not a functioning business. I truly enjoy growing plants and the beauty of them. I like watching them grow. It's an outlet for my creativity. I truly do enjoy it. This was a major battle between my past and my future. I tried to give up the plants. I have maybe a couple of thousand in the backyard, but no way could I drop them. I knew exactly what was happening. The more I tried to give them up, the more the resistance. It was a battle of its own until finally I didn't fight anymore. I put my mind off from having them as a business. I use them as a pressure release. I go out every now and again, potter around for 2 or 3 hours, and that satisfies me. I have come to some balance between my past and my future. As soon as I did this, the conflict ceased. Now we come to some powerful dreams I had. This dream was a few months before the start of the Ukraine war. I was speaking to somebody and I was telling him that I was going to die tomorrow morning. They are coming to kill me, I said. I wasn't fearful of dying at all. I didn't want to die, but I wasn't fearful of it. There was only a slight apprehension. That's all there was. The next morning I went out the front door. The sun was shining and it was a cool, crisp morning. I saw 4 jet fighters flying nose down all in a row, heading straight for the ground. At the last moment they pulled up and landed on the road outside my house. Out of these jet fighters came the pilots. They were gigantic men and were in battle dress dripping with weapons. Rambo looked like a skinny weakling compared to these warriors. There were 4 of them, and they were walking side by side towards me. As they came close, I said with a bit of false bravado, "It's a beautiful morning to die, isn't it?" As they walked up to me, they kept going past. And the one closest to me turned to me and said, "We're not here to kill you." And they just kept on walking past. Straight away I knew who they were. They were the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Then the war in Ukraine began not long after. I'm trying to remember these dreams in the right order, because they definitely changed over the last 2.5 years. I had many dreams of driving my vehicle on my path, which I've had nearly all of my life. One of them was I was going backwards down this mountain. and as I was going backwards, I was overtaking another car, which also was going backwards. Suddenly, I realised I cannot go any further in this direction. As I thought this, a strong wind began blowing up the mountain and stopped my backwards journey and began pushing me forward once again. Another dream was similar. I was in a jet fighter flying at about 30,000 feet. I was nose down and going full throttle towards the ground. Just as I was about to hit the ground, I pulled up at the last minute, skimmed just above the earth and shot straight back up into the sky. These were the times when I was in conflict, and I did go backwards. Every time I pulled myself up and reasserted myself, centered myself and moved forwards again and again on my path. I had many dreams like this. I remember another dream where there were two mountains, one small one and one large one. I was on top of the small one and was wearing a flying bodysuit. I jumped off a cliff and was flying down from the top of this small mountain. I was following a road and was dropping lower and lower and needed to land. There was a jetty ahead and I flew down along this jetty, slowed down and stood up and landed safely. I then said to myself, I've learned how to do the small mountain. Now I can go up and do it from the top of the big mountain. This is all preparing me for the future. Everything I'm doing is a learning process, preparing me for what is coming, the big leap into the unknown. The next dream was a powerful dream. I was living on a farm, a large property, and there was another person who was also on this farm. He came up to me and said there is a creature stuck in a portal down the bottom of the property. I said I would go down and have a look, and he said I wouldn't go down there if I was you. Curiosity took over, and I had to go and have a look. I went down, and the best way to explain what I saw was it looked like at the top of a mushroom as it pushed its way up through the earth. It was about 5 meters in diameter, totally smooth with a dome like the top of a mushroom. I began walking around it and came to a place where I saw what can only be best described as a flap of skin. It was about 2 or 3 inches long and about 1 inch wide. I started tugging on it, pulling very hard, and then all of a sudden, this creature, or whatever it was, erupted from the earth and completely enveloped me. Next thing I knew, I was inside this creature. It was strange. I was in some type of bubble. I wasn't frightened, and I was speaking to it. I was reassuring it, saying it's okay and there's no need to fear. I then woke up. In this next dream, I was pushing my vehicle on this narrow path up a mountain. The path was very narrow, and on each side was a massive drop. There was no room to move. All I could do was move forward. It was very steep and was only moving very slowly, 1 inch at a time. It was rough with nothing but rocks and potholes. I could see the top about 10 or 20 feet in front of me. I did manage to push it to the top, and it levelled out. Then woke up. It was a hard slide pushing that van up the mountain, and it's a hard path I was taking at the time, which represented what I was going through. In this next dream, I was standing at the front of a train. I had no control over this train whatsoever. I was travelling through a major railway junction extremely fast. There were railway tracks crisscrossing each other everywhere. My train was turning and weaving through this maze of tracks. I knew exactly where it was going. I didn't have to do anything. I was just observing the journey. I knew, it knew where it was going. I was not fearful at all. I'm not in control of this, and I know that for sure now. I need to just let go and let the journey unfold naturally, and just work in harmony with my path. Following are some physical experiences. This first one was when I was picking up a food delivery order in the morning. As I walked out of the bakery, I heard a scream of rubber on the sidewalk. I looked to my right and there was a young lad on a bike, going very fast, and I walked out in front of him. He had to put his brakes on skidding towards me. He only just missed me. This order had to go about 3 kilometres. I delivered the food, and as I was coming out of the street, I stopped at a T-junction. I was going to turn left, and I looked right and saw an elderly man riding a push bike. He was coming towards me, so I stopped. He extended his arm, indicating to me that he was going to turn left into the street I was leaving. So I put my foot down to turn left, but he just kept on going in front of me. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. I was very close to hitting him. Why he put his arm out to turn? To indicate that he was going around the corner? I don't know. I remember I said to myself, that's 2 near misses in this one job to do with push bikes. I'd better keep a close lookout for bikes today. Later I was going to pick up another food order. It was about 12:20 p.m. lunchtime. I was travelling along one of the busier roads and workmen were working on a property. There were 2 workmen with stop signs stopping all the traffic in both directions, allowing a large truck to exit the property. About 5 cars in front of me had already stopped. I also was coming to a stop and decided to turn right to bypass the delay. I began to move into the turn right exit lane when the car shuttered. I saw a motorbike cartwheeling in the air past my car, followed by the rider also in the air. I stopped my car to help the man who had already stood up and picked up his bike and was pushing it around the corner I was turning into. He said to me I cannot stop, don't call the police, and walked off. The workman with the stop sign said he was speeding, overtaking the cars behind me, assuming that I was going to stop. But I started to turn right as he was passing me. The bike clipped the back of my car door, which sent him flying. He wasn't too hurt, just some skin missing here and there. His Harley-Davidson bike didn't have a scratch I could see. I never saw him again. I didn't worry about the small dent near the back of my 21-year-old Mitsubishi Mirage. I was being prepared for this to happen, with the 2 previous experiences. About 3 weeks later, I started work in the morning. I drove out of my driveway onto the road and within 100 metres, somebody sitting in a parked car opened their door without even looking. I don't know how I missed that car door, but I did. My heart was in my mouth once again. I said to myself sarcastically, this is a good start to the day. I drove up the road, did a left-hand turn, and I went about 60 metres and you wouldn't believe it. Somebody else opened their car door in front of me. I just missed that one as well. That's twice, once again. I turned around and went home and didn't work. I don't have to be told more than twice anymore. I've learnt my lesson with that one. I had another weird experience recently. I was driving along and a big orange and black hornet flew in through the window and lodged in my ear. It was about 1 inch long. I didn't know it was a hornet at the time and instinctively I brushed it out of my ear and it landed on my knee, just staring at me. When all of a sudden it took off and came straight at my face. Just at the last second it turned and flew out the window. I hadn't seen one of those hornets in a very long time. It had been years. They're usually more in the country than in the suburbs. The next day I was out in the backyard with my plants looking at this hanging vine. I was just standing there and the same hornet was back, just hovering around this plant about a foot away from me. I could swear it was the same hornet. It was the same size, everything about it was the same. It probably wasn't the same one, but it was still a hornet. It was not aggressive or anything. It just hovered there for a couple of minutes and then flew off. Once again, the same event happened twice. I decided to go and look up the meaning of the hornet. I looked it up and the meaning was, take action now. Once again, I was being urged to work harder. This has been a recurring theme over the last 2 years. A few days before this, I had a powerful dream. I was in a jet fighter again and was just skimming above the earth in a fog. This fog was bright and white, but above that, it was thick and black and very dark. I couldn't see in front of me in this white fog, but there was a voice in my head guiding me. It was saying, just follow my voice and I will lead you out of the fog. You'll have to go to a level of 56,000 feet to clear it. I then flew straight up following the voice and I then woke up. Nearly all my resistance has gone and I have doubled my efforts. And now most of my time is spent doing these episodes. I've cleared a lot of the fog of my own mind. Now we come to the last event I will share in my spiritual journey. This is the second physical supernatural event I've experienced in my life. The first was the one I explained in my first episode of my spiritual journey, a ghostly visitation. This event happened in mid-October 2023. I had recorded an episode in my small office. The next day I began editing this recording, and as I was editing it, I came across a phrase which I had not spoken. Yes, you heard it right. I had not spoken these words. I thought about how this could possibly have happened for a very long time. I went over every angle, every scenario in my brain, trying to figure out how this sentence or phrase could possibly appear. No one else could have done this because the computer was password protected. My partner is the only other person in the house, and she definitely would not have done this. The sentence stood out. It was completely out of context with the recording I was doing, and it said, "The Lord has been kind unto you." I mulled over this for another day. I then asked ChatGPT where it was a biblical phrase, and from what time period was this English from. And this is what AI said. The phrase, "the Lord has been kind unto you," appears to use older or more formal English language conventions. It incorporates archaic language forms that were more commonly used in earlier centuries, particularly in religious or literary contexts. In modern English, a more common way to express the same sentiment would be something like, "you have been blessed," or "you have been fortunate," which use the contemporary language and phrasing. The use of the Lord instead of God, or the Almighty, is a common feature of older English, often associated with religious texts or historical writings. The use of unto instead of to is another archaic aspect of the phrase. To pinpoint the exact time when this kind of language was commonly used, it would help to have more context or information about the source of the quote. However, based on the language alone, it is reminiscent of early modern English, which was in use from the late 15th to the mid-17th century. It's worth noting that variations of archaic language can persist in religious texts and traditional ceremonies, even in more modern times, so the use of such language doesn't always indicate a specific historical period. I have no idea who or what wrote that phrase. It is a complete mystery to me. I'm not worried about it at all. I take it as a positive event. Maybe one day I will meet the author. The only slight link I've come up with is the ritual I did in the dark night of the soul. The manuscript this ritual came from was written in the 14th century, or thereabouts. There has to be a reason for this happening, but I haven't a clue what it could be. Well, dear listeners, we have come to the finish of my journey to the present day. The 31st of December, New Year's Eve 2023. I have been totally honest in my description of events. I would have liked to share more of some experiences with you, but the privacy of others had to be respected. All I have described was from memory. I never kept a diary of my life, except for the 6 months ritual during the second chapter of my journey, called The Dark Night of the Soul. In future podcasts and videos, I will impart all the knowledge I have in ways that are useful for people living their everyday lives. I will impart all the knowledge I have in ways that are useful for people living their everyday lives. We are now living in the most exciting time in human history. Even though it may not seem like it, we are. As a collective whole, we are fast moving towards the consciousness of humanity rising to the next level. I have been watching this energy entering our planet for over the last 20 years. We are possibly entering the period of the dark night of the soul on a collective level. The entire race will and is being affected. I will go into this in far greater detail in the future. By raising our vibrations, we are bringing in a more positive energy to the planet. After this, I intend to do another series of podcasts called Please Allow Me to Explain. Before any headway can be made, we need a solid foundation. If a house is built on sand, it will soon sink. But if our spirituality is built on a solid foundation, it is solid, to the point of being unshakable. The Please Allow Me to Explain podcast will start with pre-birth, where we plan our future lives. And then I'll go through all aspects of our lives, starting from when we're born and all the stages of development, both physically and spiritually. It is time now to bring the physical and the spiritual together and merge the two. Instead of having a superstitious outlook on spirituality, mysticism, and the supernatural, bring them into our lives and make the supernatural natural. It's time for us to move to the next level of awareness, where we have control over our lives, where we can see how our lives are manifesting, and we can change anything that we don't like. The date is now the 4th of February, 2024, and I thought I would just add this small part to the end of the story. Just a brief update on my battle with the impatience and anger issues I have been dealing with It's definitely working. There is no doubt. I find now when I start driving that I automatically go into the state of calmness. The impatience is still there, but with varying degrees of severity. It would be so easy to slip into complacency, where I would feel a certain level of calmness and still have the mental process of the impatience. It would be like having a mild headache, which did not stop me from working, but it was always there in the background. I'll not be happy until it is completely gone. As for the anger, I rarely go there. Anger is the next stage down from the impatience. If I'm dealing with the impatience, then I'll never go to the anger state. What I have noticed, though, is that the benefits of the calmness also affect other areas of my life besides driving, which is a major plus that is understandable. The only other interesting event was a dream I had where I was fronting a panel of people. There were about 8 of them. I was being interviewed by each person in turn. I can't remember what I was asking for, but everyone had to sign off on it. I finally came to the last person, and he said, "Yes, I will sign off onto this." He then asked, "Have I a pen?" I said, "No, I don't think so." He didn't have a pen to sign it. I then said, "I think I do have one." And I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a pen and gave it to him. He then signed the document. Whatever it was I asked for, I had to obtain permission from everyone on the panel. I just thought I would document this dream. Whatever it was signed off on, and only time will tell. I'm sincerely grateful to all the people who have listened to these episodes over my spiritual journey, and hopefully you join me in the future episodes, where I also will be sharing my journey as well, and we can all go forward together. Once again, thank you.